Hello and welcome to another Luminar Coffee Break. I'm your host, Vanelli. Now, joining me today is a special guest who's an educator and a photographer. Please welcome Darlene. Hello, Darlene. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Vanelli.
Yep. We have it. There we go. I got you up there. Good. So, Darlene, what type of photography do you find yourself gravitating towards?
A people photographer. So my background is I've done lots of portraits and weddings over the years. And while I don't take those jobs commissioned anymore, I still do primarily people photography, even when I'm traveling.
Well, that's great. All right. And what we're going to talk about today, excuse me, one moment. You know, I just realized. Let me make sure. 78 degrees. Are you still waiting to get into the chat? If so, let me make sure that I have that option set. Um, Windows, one moment. Because we normally have a lot more people coming in at this time. So let me just make sure, bring all. Good. Oh, he's waiting still to get in. One moment. Let me. We're almost there. So sorry, everyone. Let me show all the windows. Bandwidth statistics, overlay preferences, comments and reactions. Good. 78 degrees. Let me know if you're in. Hey, David, you had no problem getting in? Good. All right, so maybe that's what it is. They had me checking on something that we didn't need to do. All right, so we're set. And let me just pull up all the windows. There we go. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, oh, he just set a reminder. Thank you. So what we're going to do is talk about how to problem solve natural light photography. Now, the easiest way to do it, of course, when we're out and about and we're actually photographing in the environment, there are a few tips we can do that capture the shot. One of the questions I asked before the show was, do you use fill light when you're shooting a portrait outside? So let me share my screen for a moment. And as I do that, for some reason I lost all my windows. So let's do this. Show all windows. Wow, there's a ton of them. All right, here we are.
Photography is all about patience, technology, right?
All right, so um, here's the image I want to share with you guys. Now, this particular image was shot in a park under a bunch of trees. So let's go to the very top. Here it is. Here, right here, is how we set it up. We have a softbox, a paint pole, and of course my flash. All right. So that's what we use to set the shot up. Now let me show you what it looks like. So this right here, guys, is called the KC pole adapter. So you buy this here for like 20 bucks at any hardware store. I think I got this at Home Depot. And it's great because you could use it, as a boom. So if I wanted to do a hair light, or if I wanted to be the main light, or if it was a fill light, I could use it that way. But this is the device you have to get. KC pole adapter, Darlene. KC came from Joe McNally's assistant. Joe McNally's assistant was named KC, and so
Nice.
they created this in honor of him. So then what you need is a speed ring. Now the speed ring connects to the softbox. This connects to the pole adapter. And then you stick your flash right in here. This is very lightweight. If you try to put a very heavy studio light on this, the person is going to be falling, or the light itself, if you're trying to get the light aiming at the subject, it'll just drop. If you turn to the side like this, it'll just drop down. So it's important that you only use this with speed lights or lights that are very light, all right? So again, that's called a KC pole adapter. And I use the paint pole, and you have your speed ring. Now, in doing that, let me pull this back up again. Yeah, for some reason, there we go. So in doing this, we ended up with a few of these shots here. Some of these shots are with the speed light, and some were just reflector. Now, obviously, you can tell the difference because for this one, for instance, if you look at the catch lights in the eyes, you'll notice once it refreshes, all you'll see is a reflector. So we'll see the reflector here. Hey, Ev, how you doing? We'll see the reflector. What we won't see is the catch light from the actual flash itself. All right? So here's a real quick edit. So to fix problems with natural light, I love the bokeh in the background. If I were to expose for her, then obviously the background's going to be blown out. If I expose for the background, she's going to become a little bit darker. So we popped a little reflector in, but it didn't do its job. So I like starting with AI Enhancer as the look. And I can crank it up just a bit. Good. So already, that simple tool brought out the color for me, but there's still more. This is where the new Portrait Enhancer comes in. I'm going to crank it up just a little bit just to smooth the skin. But while I'm here, this is my favorite for the portraits. Look at this. It's as if I'm adding a stronger reflector after the fact. And I like it right about here. Good. And then I can come back through and make some more of my changes. From there, I can even go into the Pro Tools. And if I want to enhance again, more light drawn to her, we can work on advanced contrast. And here with advanced contrast, watch what it's going to do. Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see it. 50% is good. So with advanced contrast, I'm going to bring up the highlights. Notice it's bringing back some of the color of the skin, and it's giving the skin a little more detail, but you have to be careful we don't go overboard and we get these artifacts coming in. So a little goes a long ways. There we go. And last but not least, if I want, hey Dave, how you doing, bud? And last but not least, a lot of times I like to throw a vignette in here, and all the vignette's going to do for me is darken the bottom half of the image a little bit and kind of guide the viewer to her. So just that little extra. I'll turn it on and off. All it's doing is tying all of that together, and if I think it's too much, I'll dial it back a bit. And then, like we talked about before, Rich Harrington brought out a great rule of over editing, the 50 to 70% rule. Bring it all the way back to 0. Dial it back to about maybe between 50 to 70%. So this way it doesn't look like we over-processed the image. Once again, before and after. So that was just a real quick way that we could take a good portrait that we took outside. We used a little bit of fill light, but the fill light just wasn't quite enough. This gives us that little extra ability to punch in some of the light and adjust for the problem that we created. So, Darlene, what do you have for us?
I've got a very similar situation. This is a portrait of a girl. Let me know when you've got it on the screen. That we did in one of the tours I did to India about a year ago, and we had hired these girls to pose for us in the marigold field,
Oh,
and I was demonstrating natural light.
dude, I
So
was
we
just
were
about to ask you that.
Yeah, we were
So,
demonstrating natural light. My co-tour leaders and I, Daniel and Cav. So we broke up our group into three smaller groups. We had three models, and we were each doing something different. So Daniel was working with flash, and I was working with a reflector. So I had one of my students holding the reflector. They would have been just off to the camera, sort of on the left. But as the same thing happened, I'm going to do the before and after here because I'll show you the slider, right? You can see the difference. She was still fairly dark. So I chose her to be backlit here. This was a sunset situation. So the sun is coming from behind her. I even added a sun rays filter in there because that kind of works. And the reflector just wasn't quite enough. So same situation as you were having. And the tools that I use were very similar. So I've already pre-processed this one. So you can see the before. It's quite dark and kind of flat. And I use that AI that AI accent filter, and I kind of pulled it all the way. This is something that I teach my students. Take it all the way, and then, like you said, come back, 50, 70%. So this is what it looks like without, and then I just go all the way. And in this case, I was really happy with what it was doing, so I left it almost all the way at 100% on here because it was lightening her face, increasing the contrast and the saturation. It was doing a really nice job everywhere, right? The other thing that I did was I added an edge vignette, so I darkened the edges, thus bringing like more light into her as well. And I played with the color cast in here a little bit to kind of darken the yellows. But to fix her, I'll just turn that vignette off. So you can see that's what it is without the vignette. And with the vignette, she's really being highlighted more. So I'm darkening those edges and keeping those flowers darker. And then I did the same thing that you did with the face light. That's one of my favorite things as well. So I'll just turn the portrait enhance filter off, right? Give it a second to catch up here. So I did this face
while that's
light.
giving us a second to catch up, I guess
Yep.
it's a good question to ask everyone, even ourselves. Do you think that these tools are making us a lazier photographer?
That's a good question. Okay, so there you can kind of see the before and after and what the face light is doing. I'm going to say it can make you a lazy photographer, but if you use them to your advantage as opposed to as a crutch. Okay, so I like to use my editing tools to enhance my images, to not to fix them, if that makes sense. And that's what I teach, right? So this image, could I have done it better in camera? Yes, maybe if I had used a flash instead of the reflector, but kind of defeated the purpose because I was demonstrating the reflector use, right? And I got the best image that I could in camera. And if I had lightened the whole image, then she would be the right, density. But like you said, in the image that you did of the girl by the tree, then the background would be blown out. So I wanted to keep detail in both. And I was easily able to do that by using those three tools, really. The AI enhance, the vignette, portrait, face light.
So here's the question. Now, you asked earlier, you did pay them to model.
These ones we did, yes, because
Okay.
these were dancers.
Gotcha.
So they, dressed in their traditional costumes and everything, so that they were paid, and we worked with them for a couple of hours. So this
So,
wasn't like a 5-minute photo shoot. This was like a couple of hours. We paid the farmer to use his field, the marigolds, and so on. So yes, this was a full-on paid photo shoot that they got compensated for.
yeah, so
The other
this is where people have to understand. In a case like that, that was under a teaching and learning environment. Now, imagine if you were by yourself and you only had 5 minutes to get that shot, right? Then
right.
the techniques that you were teaching them is showing them, the techniques that you're teaching them is showing them how to get the shot in 5 minutes. I'm trying to get rid of Phyllis's question. There we go. The technique that you just showed them, show them how they can get that shot in 5 minutes, nail it, and then move on to something else. Because if you weren't paying them and they just happen to be walking in the field, there's no way they're going to stop and pose for 2 hours.
Right. So let's look at this one then, because I have an example of that as well. This is also in India, but this girl was not a model. She was just walking around in the, like you said, in the field, literally. This is in Pushkar, India. So it's a camel fair where all these camel herders come to trade their camels, literally. And she was just walking around with this, pot on her head. And this is a situation where it's kind of become this scenario where there's lots of photographers and the people have come to expect to be paid when they pose, but they're not going to pose for 2 hours. No, it's like a 2-minute thing. So she expects me to give her a few rupees, maybe the equivalent of $1, something like that. And I have to make the shot in like 2 minutes. So this is natural light. There's no reflector, no flash. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're doing great.
Okay. So this is just the sun. We were there early before sunrise, and the light is now coming across her face, so it's fairly harsh. And the problem with this one was that because her skin tone was so dark, I'll do the before, that no matter what I did, her face was still too dark. So I used that same face light again. This is when I've used it at about 45. So I'll just take it down to 0 or almost 0 to show you how dark her face was without it. And it's like you said, it's that magic. It knows where the round part of the face is, and it's going to light the face. You have to be careful, like you said, about being subtle and not going to extreme, because something that I teach is you want to make sure that your editing is not obvious, right? So this is too obvious, right? You want to make sure that you don't make devil eyes and they look like they're from another planet. So you want to keep it that it's enhancing the photo. It doesn't, like when somebody looks at your photo, you want them to say nice image, not nice nice processing, right? So my goal is I want them to see the image in the girl, not my processing. So keep it subtle. So this one key was face light, and the other one that I use a lot is advanced contrast. So let me just turn that one off. So I've used the mid-tones, and see how it's really just kind of brightening her up and brightening the colors. I use that one a lot. If I bring it up a little higher, I'll do an even nicer job. So I often use that to punch up my portraits, and I'll save it as a look as well. Like I've got looks saved for single portraits and for group portraits.
Well, that's great. All right. So the question we asked, excuse me. Yes, Ev, I should be coughing on my elbow. I'm so sorry. Nobody's here except me. Ev is reminding me nonstop. Yeah. So again, what I don't like hearing is, "Oh, I'll just fix that in Luminar," or "I'll fix that in Photoshop." That's something you should never say, unless you look at that and think, wait a minute, this will take 5 seconds to fix in Luminar. However, for me to run clear across this field to get to get my reflector, well, it's going to take me a good 25 minutes, and I'm going to miss this perfect shot. At that point, you make a decision.
Yeah.
Have you, especially you do a lot of traveling.
I do a lot of traveling, and like I said, a lot of times a portrait photographer also chooses the time of day that they're shooting, right? Like if I'm doing a commissioned portrait, we're shooting right before sunset, like an hour to a half an hour before sunset. So I'm not shooting at midday. If I have to shoot at midday, like when I was doing weddings, then I would find a place where there's some shade, or I'm working in the shade of a building, or if there isn't any shade, then I'm probably going to backlight them and use some flash for sure. But I also believe in working smarter, not harder. So I pick my battles, right? So I would rather I've done a lot of private tutoring sessions recently, and one question I get asked is, well, what happens if the light is bad, or if the subject's in the bright sun and they've got harsh light on their face, but the background is really dark or the background is blown out? And my answer is, I probably don't take that picture. I had another fellow, I don't have the image on my screen now, shot in the same camel fair where he was actually backlit, and I wanted to have him side lit because he had this great texture on his face. And I don't speak Hindi, I don't speak his language. So all I did was walked around the other side of him, and he turned to follow my camera because he wanted me to pay him, right? So I'm choosing where to position myself to get the angle of light that I wanted, instead of trying to fix a backlit situation.
Well, that's awesome.
In that case.
By the way, Russo noticed this too. Before we even began the program, earlier this morning, or this afternoon, I went to YouTube to check it out, and somebody already put a thumbs down. It didn't even it wasn't even being shown. Yeah, so I agree with you. Who would put a thumbs down on a something like this? Anyways, well, this is great. And again, for someone like yourself who does do a lot of traveling, I'm sure the first time you did that trip, you went out and you brought everything under the sun with you, and you realized, I only used a few things. The next time we got smarter and smarter. So as photographers, it's our goal to travel smarter. And if you don't have the proper tools, then you figure out something. A good example would be, we all know we're not going to photograph in broad sunlight unless we have a diffuser to make sure that light is coming in is going to be nice and soft. Or we take them into a closed shade situation. So if you look up and you can see the sky, then you're in open shade. If you look up and you can't see the sky, there's a canopy of trees or an overhead, well, then you're in closed shade. So those are little tips and tricks that you would do to bring people in to places to fix natural light before you bring it into your software.
Exactly. I mean, it has to do with, the old phrase to go to extremes, garbage in, garbage out. But if you're starting with a better image to begin with, if you're not working on trying to correct the light because it's too harsh or it's backlit or it's the wrong angle, you can't fix, the wrong angle of light. You're fighting against it. So if you can do the best job in the field, make sure you've got, if you want soft light, because like the girl in the marigold field, the light is very soft, she's backlit. Make sure you get the quality of light and the direction of light right in the field, and then you can just enhance what's there. You can tone things down. I use the software to tone down, highlights and things like, in this case, in this girl here, there was a guy in a red jacket in the background, and I just used the color panel to get rid of the red. So if you want me to, I can turn that off here too. So where are we? Right. So I just masked this one. See the guy in the red back here?
Yep.
Right. So when I turn that on, I'm just taking off the red in the background.
Well, that's great. Well, hey, Darlene, thank you so much for taking time out today and joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, for everyone, if you like what we're doing, please give it a thumbs up. And then if you want to be notified when, when all of these are coming out, please make sure you click the notification button up on top or ring the bell. Now, this episode came about because, again, one of our viewers sent me an email and said, hey, Vanelli, I'm having major problems with natural light. What are some tips we can use to fix natural light problems? And then we came up with this. I found Darlene, brought her in on it, and over the next week or two, we'll have a ton of other special guests coming in, and we'll pull from their expertise. So please, keep those comments coming in, and any suggestions you have, let me know, and we'll put them into the show. We have Vanelli. Thanks for watching another Luminar Coffee Break.